the heart and soul behind every business. Stories. Welcome to Business Story of the Week, hosted by me, Joshua Laurie. From setbacks to comebacks, from tragedies to triumphs, we inspire entrepreneurs through conversations that matter. Witness the magic that turns dreams into reality. Whether it's your career, business, or life, your success is always one story away. This is Business Story of the Week. And welcome back, folks. Welcome back to Business Story of the Week. I am your host, Joshua. And today is quite literally one of my favorite topics for all the listeners out there. You guys are no strangers to stories. But the question is, again, why do stories have the power to transform not just brands, not just, businesses, but also captivating audiences and, individuals? And why do they captivate like nothing else? Well, today, ladies and gentlemen, we have the perfect guest to answer that question. Gabrielle Dolan left her corporate career 20 years ago to teach business people how to communicate more effectively through stories. She's now considered one of the world's leading experts in storytelling and real communication. Her clients include EY, Visa, Uber, Amazon, Mattel, AstraZeneca, Salesforce, and the Obama Foundation. Gabrielle says that one of the highlights of her career was meeting Barack Obama while doing storytelling training for the Obama Foundation. That is very, very cool. And I'm very excited to have Gabrielle on the show today. Gabrielle, thank you for coming on. How are you doing?
Thanks, Joshua. I'm doing well, and it's great to be here.
I'm excited. It's quite literally, I would consider myself a bit of a storyteller as well. If not a story enthusiast, but also that's quite literally the second name of the show. We love stories on this show, and there's a lot of stories to uncover, and one of them being is for you, Gabrielle. Where did this all begin? You left your successful career in technology, you changed management, and you pursued storytelling. But what happened along the way? Anything else in your childhood? As a child, did you always know you were going to be a storyteller? Did you always feel that there was a lot of stories inside you? What inspired this major shift? What is the story of Gabrielle Dolan?
What is the story of me and my storytelling? Well, first of all, Joshua, when you said right at the start, I consider myself a bit of a storyteller. We're all storytellers.
Yes,
And
we
so
are.
as human beings, we are all storytellers. So, sometimes when I work with clients and they go, I just don't tell stories. I go, you do. I bet you do. I know I can make you tell them better. But
Mhm.
I don't know about you, but my generation growing up, I'm from a family of 8 children, and you sort of spent your time sitting around telling stories.
Yes,
So I think my
yes.
dad was a very good storyteller. And look, and I didn't. It's not that when it hit me then, I think that was just my reality and a lot of people's reality at that stage. So
Mhm.
I think I first discovered, well, not I think, I know I first discovered the power of storytelling in my corporate career. I was a senior leader at one of Australia's leading banks, and my last couple of years at the bank were in change management roles. Being in change management, you're rolling out new technology and you have to go around to the business units and explain to them why the change is happening and how it's going to impact them and all those things. And what I noticed is that when I shared a story, it
Mhm.
seemed to get the message across better. Now, it wasn't a silver bullet. Managing change is hard, but people
Mhm.
seem to understand the message more effectively. So this was probably about 22 years ago. Well, I started to explore this concept of storytelling, that I think sharing stories is a communication skill, it's an influencing skill, it's a leadership skill. And what I started to notice was that the really good leaders were telling stories, the great
Mhm.
salespeople were telling stories, the brilliant presenters were sharing stories. Yes, it's almost 20 years ago to the month that I left my corporate career, and
Mhm.
I decided that I would be the one that could teach people not only the importance of storytelling in business, but how to do it effectively.
That's fantastic. I mean, again, like we are all storytellers at heart, regardless of what career path you're walking. Especially seeing leaders, definitely the most effective leaders are great storytellers. Why do you think that is? Why do you think it's captivating for a leader? You're looking at someone, especially someone you look up to, and especially in the business setting. Why do you think stories are so captivating? What makes leaders really effective storytellers? Or is it the other way
Yeah.
around, actually? Are effective leaders good storytellers, or are they effective leaders because they are good storytellers?
That that is a very good question. Very good question. And I would suggest that the people that understand the power of storytelling are naturally very good communicators, which makes
Right.
them good leaders. I
There you
think the very good leaders that maybe they're coming across the power of storytelling invest time in learning how to do it more effectively and
go.
putting the time and effort into it. So, yeah, it could be a bit of both, but I think you're onto something there. But why is storytelling so effective in business? I think there's several reasons.
Mhm, mhm.
One is the way we communicate in business is pretty dry. I mean, there's a lot of by
Yes.
default, there's a lot of facts and figures and logic,
Mhm,
and it's quite dry material. And
mhm.
so the moment someone then shares a story, it automatically grabs the audience's attention, and that is the power of storytelling. So there's so much research done by neuroscience that says that our the human brain is hardwired to listen to stories because
Mhm.
stories ultimately tap into emotion. Now, when I say emotion, I'm not talking about emotional or anything, but they
Mhm.
tap into emotion. And as human beings, it's what we engages us. So it first engages us. It makes your message memorable, and that's one of the most important things. I mean, even if you've got people out there that go, "No, storytelling's a bit fluffy or whatever," it's going to make your message more memorable, so people actually
Yeah.
understand what you're saying and remember what you're saying. And then it can actually tap in, and because it taps into the emotion, and there's a lot of research that shows that when you hear a story, you not only connect with the story, but
Mhm.
you connect with the storyteller itself. So it's
There you
actually
go.
done right. It's strengthening the relationship between you and the people you're sharing it with. And now, whether that's as a leader, it's you and your team, or
Mhm.
whether it's you and your clients or your potential clients,
Mhm.
um, you know, having something that can help you communicate better and that can help you build credibility and strengthen a relationship, that's a very powerful thing, and that is what a story can do.
That's it. That's what makes power story very powerful, because we're looking for always something to relate to, right? And
Yeah,
these stories are a great way for people to just kind of like, hey, he's just like me. He went through the same thing. He went through these stories, and
yeah,
we tapping into that emotion, like you said, like businesses tend to be dry, they can tend to be boring, business talk, so to speak. But when you tell these stories, you get to kind of like sit right next to the listener, you know,
yeah,
for
yeah.
you
And
to,
you said before it sort of makes you human. It's like we talk
yes,
about, again, if you're talking about a leader to your team and your employees, we say things like you need to be more human, you need to be authentic, you need to be relatable. And if you share a story, people go, "You are just like me.
yes,
You do have the same challenges." And even when you're thinking whether you're talking to customers or clients or potential clients, they want to know that you're just like us and that you get
yes,
me. So a story has a power to do that. Unfortunately, what I see a lot of the time, or people are thinking they're sharing stories and they're actually just sharing case studies. And a case study is not a story; it's a case study, and it serves a completely different purpose. And
of course.
I run a business on storytelling, and I absolutely use case studies. They can provide really valuable information, but the biggest mistake people can make is thinking that a study is a story, because it serves a completely different purpose.
I love that, and it brings us exactly precisely to that question, which is the power. We talk about the power of storytelling. Maybe now we could move on to a bit of like what makes a story effective. Like how do you build a proper story, right? Like one can just ramble on and just like talk about everything and talk about their own stories. People can do that. We're all storytellers at heart, but how do you structure a story so it's effective and that people can easily relate to it? What are the elements of what makes a really good impactful story.
Yeah, and look, and this is the critical thing. This is
Yeah.
one of when I run my workshops and training, because storytelling is a skill, and just like any other skill, the more we learn about it and the more, if we get taught about it, the better we'll be at it. So because there's a very big difference between just sharing a story
Mhm.
and sharing a story effectively. So
There you go.
where I start is the fun. Maybe I'll go through some of the common mistakes people make, and that is that they
Please.
try to put too many messages into their story. So I fundamentally start with, what's the one single message of your story? See, I still to this day have clients come to me, or potential clients come to me, and say, "Can you help us come up with our strategy story?" It's like, there's not one story
Mm.
that is going to describe your entire strategy, or
Yes,
a
exactly.
brand story. It doesn't exist. It's like
Hmm.
you need lots of stories. So
Hmm.
one single message per story, I think that's the most important thing. Often when people, they can't think of a story, I go, what's the message you're trying to get across? Why are you trying to share the story? And they actually can't articulate it, or they've got like 3 or 4 messages in it. So that's where you start. You always start with, what's the message, what's the purpose of the story. No, 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 you go.
Yeah, because what is the purpose? Why are you telling this story in the first place? Because otherwise you'd just be rambling on, right? And you wouldn't be touching
Yep.
on the point that you need to touch up on. So it's of course the purpose and why you're telling this story is also what makes it meaningful. And I think that's what
Yeah.
makes powerful stories and storytelling in particular, however, what are the more practical aspects would you be able to share us today and how to make us more effective storyteller when it comes specifically to the storytelling, like how, like some drama or some up and down emotions, or the what do you call it, the culmination, the conclusion of it
The
all.
the heroes.
Precisely, would love
Yeah.
for you.
Okay. So it's not that. So there's a few basic things. And to get it really basic, it needs to have a beginning, middle, and end. And I know that seems really basic, but there's a lot of people that tell stories without an ending, and you do not want to be that person. Even the never-ending story ended, so you don't want to be that person. Um, they've got to be succinct. So I think one of the biggest mistakes people make, and I think there's so many mistakes, or a common mistake
Mhm.
people make, is that they go too long. They go way too long. My advice is your story should be around 60 to 90 seconds, and absolutely no longer than 2 minutes, because when we think of sharing stories in business, some of us sort of go, "Oh, I don't have time,"
Mhm.
or "Oh, they take forever." It was like, because they're taking too long. So, and when people do this, it's sort of self-indulgent. It's like their storytelling is all about them. So you've got to be really disciplined. So that's the one thing. How you start your story. So my advice is, your story should be one sentence. It's the hook. And the easiest way to do that is with time and place. So for example, when I was a kid, I grew up on a farm, or this morning at gym.
Okay.
One of the biggest mistakes people make is they just go on and on at the start, or they start their story with, "Let me tell you a story." It's like, it's sort of, when people go, "Let me tell you a story," it's like, please don't, please
Exactly,
don't tell me a story.
exactly.
Yeah. So
So,
it's don't, so you, really common mistakes is, don't start with "Let me tell you a story," and never end with "The moral of the story is." So there's the real skill in how you end it, how you get your message across in a way that people get the message, but without you direct telling them what it is. And Joshua, my main focus, I think the most powerful stories anyone can share, is the stories that are non-work related. So it was like it happened in your personal life, maybe when you're a kid or on the weekend, and linking it to your business message. They are the most powerful stories. They're the most underutilized stories. And I think because a lot of people don't, when I say they don't think they're allowed to, it's almost they're thinking, "I don't think that's important or professional."
mhm.
So part of the work I do that I love is, after I do my workshops, I have so many people go, "I never even thought to share a personal story to communicate a
You're right.
business message." And so I hope that my work gives people permission to do it, to say not only this is professional, but it's the most effective way to communicate and influence, but also give them the capability to do it well, which means they will have the confidence to share it.
Wow, that's it. The confidence as well is the one thing. By the way, I just want to touch up on that. Like, never start your story by saying, "Oh, I'm going to tell you a story.
Yeah.
This is story time," or I don't know what's worse, starting the story that way or ending it with like, "So the moral of the story is," like, oh,
They're
please.
both. I see some people like they go, "Let me tell you a story about," and the reason I'm telling you this story, and the moral of the story is, and it's like, stop mentioning the word
Exactly.
story.
Stop it.
It's
Stop
like
it.
you don't have to say the word story
Hmm.
to share a story. So
Right.
that's that would be my little challenge to anyone. Share a story without actually saying the word story.
I love that. I love that. And of course, you again, you talk about digging deep and gaining that confidence to be able to tell that story as well. Which also, I feel like it. That's why it matters to tell stories that are meaningful to you, right? Like
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
meaningful to because then you'd be able to kind of dig deep deeper and then tell that story in such a meaningful way that also means a lot. But also, I think it's also just as much of a challenge to tell a story in 2 minutes. And I think that it's truly the best storytellers, the best effective speakers tell the stories really, really well in two
yeah.
minutes.
Yeah,
That is a challenge.
I see people share stories and I go, that would be so much more effective if it was half the time. Hey,
Please.
we can't do a whole thing on storytelling and not give
Mhm.
an example
I
because I
would love to. I
actually
was going to ask you for a story. I wasn't going to end this interview, this thing together, this episode with us without a story. So please give
no,
us an
no.
example.
I see storytelling experts, because everyone's a storytelling expert these days.
Mhm.
Um talk about storytelling and don't mention a story. So let me give you an example because I think this really sums up, because sometimes we talk about personal stories and going deep, and it doesn't need to be like a deep personal showing
Right,
vulnerability story.
right.
So let me give you an example, and then I'll ask you a couple of questions afterwards. I did some work with a risk team, so it was the entire risk team. And the head of risk, her name was Rosemary. And Rosemary said to me, one of the biggest challenges I have, that when I speak to the business units about risk, they all look at me and go, well, you're the risk manager, that's your job. And she said, it
Okay.
doesn't matter how many times I've told them, I cannot manage your risk for you. All I can do is help you manage your risk. She goes, the message doesn't get through. Like the behavior doesn't change. She said, I've given case study after case study, example after example of the benefits of managing your own risk,
Mhm.
the consequences of not, and nothing happens. And she goes, I've tried everything. And I go, she's tried everything except a story. So
Right.
this is the story that
Wow.
she shares to great effect, right? And
Okay,
this was
please.
years ago that I worked with her.
So excited.
She said, when I was a kid, I grew up on a farm. And growing up on a farm, there was all these dangers we needed to be aware of. But mum would teach us what to do. So we knew what to do if we ever came across redback spiders in the timber heap. We knew about the potential traps in the dam after heavy rain. And we knew what to do if we came across a snake in summer. And I remember this really hot day, mum was yelling at me to get my bike from the front gate that I'd left there. And so I ran down the path and then I just froze, because in front of my bike was this massive copperhead snake. But I remembered everything mum taught us to do. So I played statues and I slowly walked backwards until there was enough space between me and the snake. And I ran back to the house to tell
Okay,
mum.
okay.
And I'm sharing this with you because it reminds me of the role we play in risk. All I can do is give you the skills, knowledge, and advice. So when you come across your own copperhead snake, regardless of what that looks like, you will know what to do. Now, let me
Mic
ask you,
drop.
mic drop exactly. Let me ask you, Joshua, 3 questions, and
Mhm,
your listeners can play along as well.
mhm.
Does that help you understand the role of a risk manager better and the role you play in risk? Does it help you understand the message better?
Absolutely, absolutely. It puts me in that
Okay.
situation and
Yeah,
it
so
simplifies
absolutely.
it for me.
Yeah, so it simplifies it and helps you understand it.
Mhm.
Will you remember that story?
Oh, absolutely. Like, especially with the snake, there's just emotion, some thrill in there. Oh my gosh, she's gonna get bitten by a snake. I will always remember that
Yeah,
story.
yeah, yes, and you will, and that you just tapped on it. The reason you'll remember it is because the story has tapped into emotion without being emotional. It's tapped into emotion, and our brain processes emotion different than logic. So you understand the message better, like you've said, absolutely. You remember it absolutely. The third question I want to ask you: if you had to, could you retell that story to someone else without losing its meaning? You wouldn't have to
Oh,
do it word for word, but could you retell it?
absolutely. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. Yeah. So if you when you think about when you're communicating, whether you're communicating to your team or to stakeholders or to clients, do they understand what you're saying? Like really understand it?
Mhm.
Can they remember it when the meeting's over, when the presentation's finished, when the discussion has ended? And if they had to, could they go back and retell it to others without losing its meaning? And a personal story will do that
Wow.
every single
Wow.
time. Where, facts and figures you still need. Like, I'm not saying you don't need all the data, but data's not sticky, data's not memorable. Story is actually makes your data and your messages and your numbers come to life. And that's what people remember. And in fact, it's the only thing people remember is the story.
That's it. That's that is so true. We could do here is show all the charts and all the data, but it's really that story that resonated the most that will be memorable, so to speak. Will you be able to remember it? Yes, of course, because it taps into emotion. But also, I love how you pointed out that a simple story, told very effectively, can be retold by anyone else. Doesn't have to be
Yeah.
word for word. I love that. And finally, of course, you asked the first one is, are you able to understand the purpose of what this story is telling, or the purpose of, why I told that story? And it goes back to the meaningfulness and the purpose of why you're telling those stories that allows you to be able to tell that story more effectively. Of
Yeah.
course, again, like
Yeah.
I wasn't going to go away without a story today, but if I have one of the more interesting stories and questions I'd like to ask you, because you have worked with one of the biggest names in the world, of the business world, but that also includes the Obama Foundation. Can you share a
Hmm.
memorable experience, highlight the highlight of that career of yours that illustrate the impact of storytelling? But more than that, talk to us about meeting the man himself. What was it like meeting Barack Obama?
Yeah. So look, it came about. It actually happened in 2019, and I got
Mm.
an email from the Obama Foundation saying, we're running a leadership program in Malaysia, and we want to run storytelling training. And I must admit, when you get an email from that, you're going, is someone just tricking me?
Sorry.
Yeah, right. I mean, it wasn't from him, but anyway, they weren't, and I ran
Mhm.
training, and it was in Malaysia, and I had a bit of a rule at the time that I never travelled for my children's birthday, and it was going to be my daughter's 19th birthday, and so
Interesting.
she'd finished
Interesting.
uni. She actually is studying politics and international studies at uni, so I asked if I could bring her along with me, and they said yes. Anyway, so we were there for the week. It was a 5-day conference. I was running storytelling training. Michelle Obama had spoken the day before, and Barack Obama was speaking on the day. He was being interviewed by his sister. And then we thought he'd actually left. They'd sort of said he had to fly straight out to Singapore or wherever. And I was sitting around with Alex, and all the 200 leaders were taken into a room to get the official photo. So one of the leaders
Wow.
said, "Oh, can you wait for me? I want to keep asking you questions." I mean, sure, I'll just wait for you here. And then Barack Obama gets, surrounded, and of course they're surrounded by
Mhm.
security guards, and he gets
Mhm.
taken in. It was like, and there was a few. There's a few speakers, and we go, and we're, you're a little bit excited.
Of
It's like
course.
I wouldn't say I'm even heavily involved in politics one way or the other, but and
Mhm.
especially American politics. I'm
Mhm.
Australian, but he walks in and he's got a bit of an aura about him, and then you get told very clearly by men carrying guns that you're not allowed to approach him,
Mhm.
and you're not allowed to ask for photos. You're not allowed,
Mhm.
like, I was like, okay. And as he walked out, he could see, we all had our lanyards on as speakers. He could see that we were the speakers. So he broke ranks and he came over and he shook our hands and he
Uh,
thanked us for it. And then he was the one, probably knowing the rule, you're not allowed to ask for a photo. He said, let's get a photo of the speaker.
Wow, beautiful.
I shoved my daughter in next to him. So there's a few of us, but he's quite tall
Mhm.
and we're not. There's him and then my daughter pretty much underneath his
Wow.
armpit and me. And it was yeah, like he spent a good 5 or so minutes talking to us. So it was pretty impressive. So the photo of him and me and Alex and a few of the other speakers is up on my wall in my
Wow.
office. I'm looking at it now.
I would put that up on my wall too if I had a photo with. I mean, whatever your opinion is of the man, I think he was incredibly charismatic. He is, I've been told that, it's natural for him to be, just have, like you said, an aura about himself. And it shows as well how effective of a leader he is to just go out there and actually connect and speak to you personally. I love that. I mean, I wasn't gonna let you go without a wellness story. But Gabrielle, I understand that your latest book, or you have your book, Magnetic Stories, it focuses on brand storytelling, and and all of that I feel like can help our audience and listeners today. I'd like to ask, what are some key elements that make a story magnetic? And how can a business leverage, or business owner entrepreneurs leverage these elements to enhance their brand? So what makes a story magnetic?
Yeah, so the concept of magnetic and why I called it that is like, think of a magnet, it sort of just sticks. And once you've heard a story, it's
Oh.
hard to pull away from it. And look, it's hard to forget it because again, that's what a story does. It's once you've heard it, it's like you create a connection. So when I talked about so a lot of my previous books have been on the individual, how you share stories to connect with your employees mainly. And this latest book, Magnetic Stories, I think the tagline explains it: connect with customers and engage employees with brand storytelling. So it's looking for those stories. And it comes back, I think, fundamentally a lot of times is the values of the organization, and whether it's again of a leader or the organization.
Mhm.
What is your brand? Now, I think your brand is like your values, how you operate. So
Mhm.
it's sharing stories of your values in action that can be really powerful. I talk about the 5 types of stories that organization can share, and one is creation story. So
Creation.
how did the organization create? Sometimes people call it the origin story,
Mhm.
but either for entrepreneurs, for example, why did you start the story? I mean, there's passion there. There's always a
Of
story,
course.
and don't
That's
lose
it.
sight of those stories because they're really powerful. So your creation story, your culture story, which is around why your
Wow.
values are important, but not just saying, we value integrity. Share a story and share a personal story around that.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then there's community stories, customer stories, and challenge stories. But again, customer stories, don't just make them testimonials.
That's
You
okay.
make the customer the hero of the story. And talk about, I loved writing that book. I got to interview so many organizations doing some really cool stuff with storytelling. One of
I
them
love.
was Columbia Restaurant in Florida. It's one of
Mhm.
the, I think it's fifth generation restaurant. And they shared a story on Valentine's Day a couple of years ago about a couple that had came to their restaurant for their first wedding anniversary. And they came back to the restaurant on their second wedding anniversary and coincidentally got seated at the same table. They have now been going to that restaurant at the same table. The restaurant reserves the table for them on Valentine's Day for 72 years. 72 years they've been going to that restaurant. And so Columbia Restaurant shared the story about, celebrating love. And it wasn't about them, but by sharing the story about their customers that have come to their restaurant for 72 years in a row, you
Interesting.
sort of go, wow, that's a really cool restaurant. Like
Mhm.
it's sort of, there's the subtle
Yes.
things in those customer stories and, like, that's so powerful. When I read that story, it's like, whenever I get to Florida, I'm gonna go to that restaurant
That's
to
it.
just see what it's like. Yeah, so it's a sort of the looking for those 5 types of stories and then being really creative on where you share them.
I love that. 5 types of stories. I want to point out one of those stories, which is talk about your vision your mission. What did you call that type of story?
The values, culture, the culture
Values and
stories.
culture
Yeah,
story.
yeah.
I love that because it's just like you said, like business talk, mission, goals, or whatever. It's like kind of as a business owner yourself, you kind of stay far away from it because it's like, oh, I have to write this now. It's kind of boring, man. But um, putting a story behind it, I feel like makes it more interesting. Advice putting a story before actually the actual vision mission statement.
Yeah, you know what? I know every organization does it. They've got our mission and our vision and our values. And Joshua, you know what they do? I see this all the time. They put it on one page
Mm-hmm.
and then they go, this is our story on a page. Or like so many people go, this is our story on a page. And I look at it, I go, there's no story there. It's just, this is our, mission. And they're normally very boring. And without them, without a story behind that, they're just they're just words. So I
Mm-hmm.
would always encourage people to put the story about why they, their passion and why they started. Another really quick one is I was at an event years ago, and it was like a networking event, and I was sitting next to this woman, and you sort of go, what do you do, what do you do?
Mm-hmm.
And she's told me that she runs some childcare centres, and I went, that's how did you get into that? And she goes, well, I used to be a dentist. And I went, that's a bit of a change. And
Yeah.
she told me, yeah, she told me that when she had a child, she was looking for a childcare centre to
Right.
send her child to. And she goes, everyone I walked into, I just thought, oh, James wouldn't love this. And she'd go into the next one, I thought James wouldn't love this. And she goes, so I just decided to buy one. And now I've got several. And every decision we make is based on, would James love this? And I
Wow.
just said to her, please tell me that story is front and center on your website. And she went, no, we talk about it internally, but don't put it externally. And could you imagine looking for a childcare center for your child and you read that story, you would
Done.
just go, sign me up, done
That's it.
deal. I
That's
don't
it.
need to know anything else.
Wow. Of course. I mean, I myself was already hooked with that story. I'd be like, whoa, yes, like it's powerful. I mean, imagine that. Gabrielle, you just sold that story like what, third hand, like maybe how many stories it
Yep.
hasn't it went
Yep.
to you. And I found it just as powerful. And I'm not even looking for a child care center. It's
Yes.
just, so
Yeah. So
for
that's
beautiful, beautiful. It's a great
Yeah, so
example.
that's when you take about what's an example of a magnetic story, it's right there, right then. It
Hmm.
would be like, it's like you said, I've told it over and over again, third hand in 30 seconds to someone who's not even looking for a childcare centre and has connected with it. So,
I love that. That's what it makes a great story great. And to all our audience listeners, of course, I hope they found that the same impact as well, as much as we did, and how much we enjoy exchanging your stories today. But Gabrielle, as much as I want you to tell us more stories, I'd love to give you this opportunities. Where can we find you? Where can we connect with you? Where can we learn more about you? Where are you most active in? Are you at Instagram or LinkedIn? Would love to connect with you and learn more about your stories.
yeah, look, I am most active on LinkedIn, so I try to role model the effectiveness of sharing personal stories in the written format as well. So you can find me on LinkedIn at Gabrielle Dolan. You can go to my website, gabrielledolan.com, and I've got a 7-day storytelling starter kit, so it's
Wow.
free. It's literally subscribe and you get
Wow.
access to that. And also, I've got my own podcast called Keeping It Real with Jack and Ral. On the Ral of that. My younger sister could never pronounce my name. She'd always say Gabrielle, and Ral has stuck, so everyone calls me Ral. So that's wherever you watch or listen to podcasts, I'm Keeping It Real at Jack and Ral. So they're the main 3 areas you can find me. And of course, you can buy my books on all the usual Amazon or wherever.
Well, I just signed up on that starter kit. I'd love to get my kit very soon. I invite our audience listeners to do the same. And of course, keeping it real, Ral. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. I mean, of course, check out that podcast for all our audience listeners out there. Um, Gabrielle, one last bit of wisdom, one last practical advice when it comes to stories. To close all of this off, what would it be? Take us home.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to say there is a skill involved, and invest in learning how to do it. But my final bit of advice is an okay story is better than no story. An
Wow.
okay story is always better than no story.
Wow, I love that. And I love that. I would take that with us for the rest of our lives and taking it from this episode. It's been great. It's been fun. We love stories, and we've got one of the best storytellers in this episode. And Gabrielle, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Josh. I really loved it.
It was fantastic. To all our audience and listeners out there, I hope you love the stories, and we will see you on the next one. Bye bye.
All right, so here's the thing. We try to get a little bit better every day, but we can't do it without you. So if you like the video, make sure to like and subscribe below. And if you have any comments, just leave them in the space under.